Hello, good to see you all. I dare say we will. There'll be more people logging in, but I think we shall start. After all, it's 2 o'clock now. So we actually had quite a few apologies, and I know at the end of June, just before summer holidays, is always a busy time. There's a lot of stuff going on, but the fact that people actually write us to tell us they can't make it, I mean, does show how many are interested in today's topic, and that's good. So that's why we are recording this session, and thank you, Lisa, for giving us permission to do that, and putting it up on our webpage so the people who can't make it today can consult the recording afterwards. And there are a couple of new faces too, which is good. Very welcome. And don't hesitate if you like today's session and you'd like to be invited to future online meetings of the ABC group, don't hesitate to let Sophie or me know. And so now I think we'll just start on the presentation. And today the topic today is about farmer to farmer mentoring and how that works in practice in the case of Pasture for Life in the UK. And the idea behind it, of course, is that people are more inclined to listen and to agree with and follow people from people who are peers. In the case of farmers, other farmers. So we all know that in practice, conservationists talking to farmers doesn't always work out so well. Farmers often tend to be skeptical, but a farmer who's farming for nature and for natural resources, if he or she talks to another farmer, that farmer is more likely to listen and say, so that's the idea behind farmer to farmer mentoring, that the farmers who are working for nature spread the message to their peers and hope to influence them so that they also will convert to a nature-friendlier form of farming. And also very important, and I know that Pasture Life has worked in this part too in terms of its program for mentoring, is the farmers who are transiting, who have decided to listen to the message from their peers, their nature-friendly peers, and to start farming more in favor of nature, that they get support especially from another colleague farmer who's been there, done that, knows what could happen, and can give really good, solid advice, hands-on advice. So mentoring is really two things. It's first of all spreading the message among your peers, and secondly, helping those of your peers who decide to follow your example, and convert to transit, helping them in practice if they have a problem, being there for them to support them. So that was the philosophy behind Pasture for Life's mentoring program. It's the same philosophy that we are trying to apply in a different context in our Agri-Nature Mentor Erasmus Plus program. And now that Pasture for Life has been doing its program for a number of years, it has been evaluated by Lisa and colleagues. And Lisa is going to tell us what that evaluation turned up, what we can learn from it, and what works in practice, what does not, tips and tricks, and all the rest of it. So, Lisa, off you go, and tell us what your evaluation turned up.
Hopefully you can see that. Can you see that?
Share your screen. Are you sharing?
Yeah, I did. Is it not working?
No.
I will try to make you co-host. Just give me a second. Oh, no, it's working.
Here we go.
It's working.
We are starting to see something.
There
Yes.
we go.
Starting to. Okay, great. So, as Anton said, I'm Lisa Norton. I work for the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and this work was funded by the Pasture-Fed Livestock Association. Jimmy's here on the call as well, I think. So I was approached by PFL about this project because I have worked with PFLA when they were PFLA, looking at the effects of their management practices on biodiversity and on a whole ecological assessment and an economic assessment of their practices, and I have familiarity with quite a few farmers and with farming, the kind of farming practices that they do, and so I was asked because the facilitator of the program felt that I had a good knowledge and would be somebody who could talk to the farmers about what they were doing. I'm not a social scientist. I am an ecologist, but I do actually, I call it going over to the dark side. I do social science as well, because ecology doesn't make much sense on farmed land unless you also think about the people that are managing. Anyway, so I'm going to show you some results from specifically initially from the part of the mentoring program that I evaluated, which was the north of England. But I will also talk you through some of the wider results for the whole program. So let's get going. So the Pasture and Profit programme was a programme for farmers in the protected landscapes of England. There's 17 of those that were in the programme, and it was to encourage farmers to farm in ways which would enhance the environment and their profits. And the PFL organisation managed the programme and the events were free to farmers and mentoring over 1 to 2 years. So the evaluation is of a pretty short-term program. But the events included a whole range of things, including on-farm events, on online webinars, covering a whole range of topics. And these topics were often co-developed with the farmers. So the farmers said what they wanted to know about, and they chatted to the facilitators, and there was a decision, okay, we can do that. There's several people interested in that. Let's have a look at that. For some farmers, so 44 in the north, that's what I was looking at, they were paired with an experienced farm mentor. So various farm mentors put themselves forward and said, yep, I'd be willing to do that. And they were paired by a facilitator with relevant farmers, depending on their interests and what they wanted to learn. They also got the free PFL membership for a year with no strings attached. So they didn't have to swear allegiance or anything like that. So this is the map of all the protective landscapes of Britain on the left. And I'll come back to it later when I tell you a bit more about the wider programme. But the bit I evaluated and going to talk about now are these areas in the north. So the Lake District, Forest of Bowland, Yorkshire Dales, North Pennines and Nidderdale. Not the Arnside and Silverdale area, which is a little tiny area, but you'll see they're quite big. So on a scale of England, they are quite big protective areas. So how we did it, I will say this was, we had relatively little resources, so we did what we could. We produced some online questionnaires at the start of the programme and asked potential mentees where they were in their farming career. Did they have local support? What their income was like, whether they were considering farming changes, how confident they were to change their farming practices, and what their ecological understandings were. So we decided to do the same survey both for the north sites but also for all the rest of the country. So we'd already done one evaluation of the north in the first year of the mentorship scheme. This is the second year that we were evaluating in the north, and we also evaluated everywhere else, but specifically this is about the north. So we also at the end of it, because one of the aims was to look of the mentorship program was to look at farmer well-being, we also used sort of a scientifically proven method of assessing well-being, which has been used with other different groups of people. And that just involves basically being asked to score against a set of statements. And you can see them there. They're about how you feel about your life and how meaningful it is, whether your social relationships are supportive, actively contributing to the happiness and well-being of others, feeling competent and capable, feeling that you're a good person and live a good life, optimistic about the future and physically fit. At the end of the programme, we went back with another online questionnaire and we asked them the same set of questions, essentially, because we wanted to see change in those answers over time. And we also went back and did exactly the same well-being questionnaire and asking them to score the statements. So those are the answers we got from the 5 areas that that I showed you. So most of them were coming from the Lake District, but also, you know, some from all the other areas were represented. We are when I was answering the question about whether they felt their income was adequate, 9 said they felt it was, 26 said they felt it wasn't. So that's not all the farmers answering that question clearly, but those are the answers we got. All of the farmers said that they were interested in making changes to their grazing, and nearly all of them wanted to also make changes to other aspects of their systems. And most said they were somewhat lacking in knowledge on how changes may impact or how to implement them. So they didn't know how to do them, and they weren't quite sure what effect that they had. And most of them were a bit lacking in confidence in implementing those changes. These were the flourishing scores. So when you do a well-being evaluation, you basically are testing whether people are flourishing or not. And the score range was like this. So actually the scores for the farmers ranked quite well alongside students, which have been another subject of this study. And their scores would tend to be, the highest would tend to be between 43 and 50, and the majority would be under 35. So farmers generally were reasonably happy people by the look of it, but that's the sort of spread of scores. So this is at the end of the program. Okay, so we're coming back. We had a lot more farmers actually do the questionnaire, as you can see. So Lake District is still the majority, and that was partly because some of the mentees were brought along during the period of the mentorship program, so they didn't necessarily start right at the beginning, but it was also because farmers wanted to do the questionnaire at the end. And 37 farmers said they felt somewhat more supported than they did at the start of the program. All farmers felt that they were more knowledgeable on grazing management at the end of the program, and many farmers had gained confidence in their ability to assess soil health and manage grazing practices which were aimed at improving it. Farmers also felt reasonably confident in assessing biodiversity on their farm. So 14 farmers all anticipated making changes, so they didn't actually make them during the period of the mentorship that we were evaluating, but 22 farmers did make changes. And here's a few quotes. There's a few quotes in this presentation, but you can see that somebody's saying this has been an extraordinary way of meeting other people who are interested in ecologically focused farming. We joined with a keen interest and have learned enormously. And then somebody else, always planned to graze rotationally, but I've learned a lot how best to do it to get the outcomes I want and suit my context. Made lots of changes as a result of the visits, conversations with the mentor and with other participants. So I attended a few of the days out and a day in making wreaths with some of the lady farmers as well. And it's very clear that they were learning from one another all the time. And it wasn't just a mentor to mentee relationship. It was also a group level relationships and a lot of discussion in the field, particularly about what was happening, how it was changing things, and different people saying, I might do it this way. So there's a lot of on the job learning going on. So here's the flourishing scores at the end. So you saw the blue bars before. These are the black bars, and you can see that there's a shift across to the right. So the scores were higher at the end. The score range is the same, and the scores were higher at the end for definite. So the black bar, both in the middle and at the end, is higher than the blue bar. And I think that's absolutely incredible that a year's program can make people feel that much better about what they're doing and about themselves. And yeah, so that's kind of publishable data because that's a distinct shift in a very short period of time. So I think that in itself, with nothing else, that would be a very high validation of the program. But we also, as well as the surveys, we also did a number of interviews. I think we did 9 in the north, with a representative group of the farmers involved. Representative meaning, you know, different gender, different length of time in the program, different lengths of time farming, different lengths of time in the area, etc. And you can see that in terms of motivation, there were some farmers who thought they probably wouldn't need it much because they learned a lot by watching videos on YouTube. And, you know, they thought it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And in terms of learning, there were lots of farmers who were saying they wished there was longer, they wished there was another year, and they felt that the visiting, be able to come back with fresh ideas and validation that they were on the right track really helped with their knowledge and their confidence. Lots of practical skills learned around grazing and outwintering cattle. I'll come on to a bit more on that on the overall study in a minute. So this is really interesting. One of the farmers talking about change, and they said, and this is a very common pattern, I'm sure in other countries as well as in Britain, before joining, we did exactly what his father and family had always did, and there wasn't much change from year to year. Whereas this year they've made a lot of changes from what they'd normally do, and they just wouldn't have done it unless somebody had told them it worked. And lots of farmers thinking about different deferred grazing, how to change the species in their paddocks, how to look at their animals and their stocking densities, how to put rotational grazing in, things they just wouldn't have done if they hadn't been in the program. And there were clear advantages of the connections made between farmers, really feel a strong feeling of community, because these are, you know, areas where they're very small communities, and they obviously may have not known each other. They may have known each other, but it's the kind of place where you need allies, kind of places where you need allies. But very confident about the future there, very confident in the opportunities, and really positive about the future of the industry. I'd have to say, somebody saying that in this year of farming in Britain is quite incredible. Because they've had a lot of knockbacks. They're getting the basic payment taken away from them through CAP, and they are also struggling from not being able to enter agri-environment schemes. So getting that kind of positivity is incredible at any time, but this particular time in farming is quite difficult for farmers in Britain. So that's the northern area. The northern area was probably the most successful, in part because it'd been going a bit longer. I don't know what other factors might be. I would say that the facilitators were absolutely fantastic in the north. I felt that they couldn't have possibly done their job any better. Made a really big difference, and there was a lot of feedback from the farmers about how professional they were and how well they'd done. But this is the report produced by Georgina Anstey, and she's an independent evaluator, and she is a social scientist. And I worked with her and some other interviewees to put together some of the results from the interviews. And these were just interviews with the farmers, and I've put that map back there again, and there are, if you look closely, some little red circles around all the areas that where the Farming and Protective Landscape program happens in the south compared to the northern areas, which you've already looked at. So 47 semi-structured interviews by telephone over that time. I did the 9 in the north, and the interviews were of people that are being engaged in an 18-month period. So they might not have been in it the whole time, but they were in it during that period. Some of them for less than 18 months. But again, it was a stratified sampling, so trying to make sure we took a good representative sample. So there were quite a personal level changes. You've already seen the results from the north. Here's some more from the wider pool, and farmers were really felt that they learned a lot about adaptive grazing practices and effects on soil health, ecosystem function, and on their farm business. And they felt they really did learn best from other farmers who were actually doing their practices, the reasons for doing them, their mistakes and their successes. All of it was important. And yeah. So some of the, I think this is a mentee talking at the top, you know, saying that you're not there to teach them. You're not there to hold their hands. You're there to transfer knowledge and guide them down many paths, not just tell them what to do. And I think that's why standing in the field with a lot of other farmers, looking at the same thing and thinking about it in your own context is really valuable, because you know not everything works everywhere. Yeah, you have to find out what's going to work for you. But all the mentors also said that they were learning something all the time by talking to different mentees, and also these larger groups where they were talking to other mentors as well. But you can see that they were really gaining knowledge was a really exciting part of the program for lots of farmers. Learning something new, they just really enjoyed it, and some of them got incredibly motivated by that and were asking for the facilitators to see if they could do this, do that. Can you put on a workshop about tanning sheep skins, or do you think you can do something about profitability, or can we have a workshop on, yeah, specifically on grazing? They were coming up with their own ideas all the time and asking for support around them. So yeah, the inspiration and motivation was really key, and as well as getting the knowledge, they really did start to get energized and more passionate and really stimulated by what they were seeing and thinking how they could do it on their land. And there's some, you know, the biggest epiphany that I've had is to see that I'm not powerless was a really great quote, because I think a lot of farmers feel like they're at the mercy of what the government wants to give them, or what the farmer wants to, what the supermarkets want to pay them, and they don't have this sort of autonomy to be able to take their own route. But by learning from others and gaining confidence from others, they were really starting to feel much more powerful about what they can do. Let you read that next quote. So practice changes were mainly around managing grazing, and a lot of them were trying all different things like adaptive multi-paddock or mod grazing, cell grazing, which are all kind of similar. Bale grazing, so rolling out bales or leaving bales out for in the field whole in the winter, were really things that farmers hadn't necessarily been doing very much at all, and were really keen to learn about. Mobile grazing, grazing for conservation, or newly including herbal lays, which they hadn't done before. Though all those things were things that people were learning about and changing. And then another key one was the use of bought-in or non-forage feed. You know, it's a pasture and profit program, and reducing those things really can help save money, and so lots of farmers were given confidence to do that. They wouldn't have done it before because their fathers always used those products, and they didn't want to be stopping something and ruining their land. But many of them gained the confidence to know that they wouldn't do that, and that there were other ways of managing it. So they were doing it either to maximize their own resources, by maximizing their own resources on farm to feed the animals, reducing the flock sizes where necessary, or changing lambing time to reduce need for inputs. Other main practice changes were around monitoring and management, mainly just looking, you know, getting farmers to actually look at their vegetation, have a look at the biodiversity, think more closely about what whether their stock were right for the farm, all those kinds of things. Infrastructure, some of them were changing those things. Use of the fertilizer, that obviously relates to the second one. Animal type and numbers. Farmers were looking at other breeds. Some of them were buying off other farmers that they met through the program. And general business changes were the other main practice picked up. So key points about the practice change that the farmers highlighted in the interviews was that more change will happen with the longer the support goes on, just inevitably. But they did say that it was hard work changing, and that there's a real evolution over time with adapting practices to your farm. So you can see what's going on at others, but it takes a bit of time to actually work out how to adjust that to yours. And you will make mistakes and you'll have to go back and do it again. But it was also clear that subtle changes in mindset were also important. That sort of seeing that other farmers really valued nature on their farm made other farmers think, maybe that's important for me too. So even just for some people who didn't have the confidence to change practices, they might often be just looking at things in a slightly different way to what they did before they started the program. And there's a real sort of bringing others along. So as well as the mentorship program and the obviously one-on-one, a lot of these farmers were then going out wider and talking to their friends. There was a lot of people who said, what a shame it's only in the protected landscapes. I know lots of farmers outside of them who would really benefit from this. But that's just the way the funding was. But it was great to hear that they were encouraging others outside of their immediate landscape to think about these changes as well. And the purpose of change was really important. So the farmers, actually, I've put them in the wrong order because mostly environment was the top one, but business obviously was also a key one. So farmers were really keen to understand how taking a more nature-based approach would also help, or could also help, with profitability of their business, and also long-term resilience was really key, both environmental and economic. So there were, I mean, some farmers, this is very short term, but some farmers felt that they'd already seen changes for nature. Other farmers said it will just take longer, but some definitely felt that within the 1 or 2 years that they changed practices, they could see changes. And they were about improved grass and grassland diversity, and better health of farmed animals and return of wildlife, particularly birds. And I think for me, as an ecologist who has done some measuring on these systems, the tall grass is a really key thing. You don't get a lot of tall grass in set stocked systems, and having tall grass is very good for mammals and therefore birds, predatory birds in particular, but it's also excellent for insects and invertebrates. So it is possible to see results fairly quickly if you suddenly have grass that's 30 centimeters high instead of 7 or 8. So I did kind of believe those changes because they are believable. And some are saying I've seen more barn owls, that's a barn owl there, in the last 6 months than I have in a lifetime. This may also be partly because the farmers are looking. They weren't really looking before and they are looking more, or it could be both. It could be that's happening, but also because they've got the long grass, they have got the owls coming to hunt. Yeah, increase in birds because of hedges in the north there. So I'm nearly there. So critical success factors that Georgina pulled out across the interviews was the peer-to-peer support model. Obviously, that would seem to work really well. Experiential learning, so actually being on farm, seeing exactly what farmers were doing, or having somebody come to your farm and show you how to move fences around, or any of the practices that you thought you might want to employ just to help you. There was a very strong culture of openness, collaboration, and warmth. Often people think farming communities are really closed and they look over the fence and say, what's he doing over there? Look at all those weeds, looks awful. But actually, that was very much not the case in this program, that farmers were really keen to share experience and support others. The regional coordinators were as I've said before, so in my experience in the north, absolutely fantastic. Couldn't have asked for better, more knowledgeable and open and engaging people. Made a really, really big difference. Part of a growing national movement. It feels like it. This is quite an extensive program with these protective landscapes. And as you'll see, the big ones in the north of England cover quite a lot of the land area. So that sort of feeling that things are changing was nice for those involved. And a real openness to trying new things, really important. There were some barriers which we picked up in the interviews because we did ask specifically about these. In some cases, farming situation, not having the power to actually change things because you're the son, or you don't actually have a farm yet. You just rent somebody's land, or you trying to think all sorts of situations really where farmers didn't feel that they had the power to change, very often around tenancy arrangements and things like that. Finding the program, some farmers took a little bit of time to find it and said that they found it a bit hard to know that it was about. That's just, I suppose, in the early stages. It's not on a big scale. It's different. It's difficult. You have to find the place where you find the farmers. Change takes a long time. I think that can be disillusioning for some farmers. If change does seem to be taking a long time, as we said already, sometimes environmentally it can happen quite quickly if there are big changes in certain aspects of the system. And in some cases there were mentoring issues. This wasn't particularly common, but sometimes there was a mismatch, and then we had to re-engage with somebody else. In one case I was aware of, I felt that it was perhaps because the mentee wasn't as open to change as they thought they were. And so it was quite difficult to match anyone to them that would have worked, really. So I think, that's always going to happen. Yeah, I felt I ought to share that because it's obviously all these organisations have funded or been involved in the evaluation. And that's it. I think that's me finished. So I'll stop.
Well, thank you, Lisa. That's really, really brilliant. And I mean, it's so good to hear about all these farmers that are so pleased with the program and get such inspiration from it. So it's open. The floor is open now. If you want anybody who wants to ask a question or make a remark, raise your hand, and then you can get the floor and ask or your question. Anna, you're off. Okay,
yeah, couldn't find the button. Hi, Lisa. Always nice to listen to you. So I just didn't get it in the beginning. Was the program, mentoring program, funded by these organizations, and they also funded your evaluation, or?
Yes, it's a farming in protective landscapes program, and they were all
Right.
the protected landscapes.
Yeah.
And they set aside a little bit of the funding, or did Jimmy might answer this better. Jimmy, did the PFL set aside a little bit of the funding to evaluate, or was that asked for by the protective landscapes?
It was definitely integral to the whole wider program. But we had different approaches in each project. So Lisa's what Lisa did in the north was more extensive than we had in all of the others. So some of them had more budget for it than others.
Yeah. And just one follow-up question about that, because I work with these programs too here, so I'm so interested in the details. Did both the mentor and the mentee receive remuneration for their time, or how did that work?
No, just the mentor.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Siggy?
Yeah, hello. It's nice to see you all. And thank you, Lisa. This was very interesting. I was just wondering, when you were choosing farmers into this group, did you have any criteria to follow? And how do you select the mentors? Are they from the beginning groups you choose, or are they outside of the group?
I think probably Jimmy's better. Are you better to answer that, Jimmy? I do know something, but I think you go.
Probably. So I mean, most of the mentors came from our existing members, and we were aware of them. And I suppose there was a recognition both within the team and the wider membership that they were the ones who'd been doing it the longest or who had adapted their farming system the greatest. That's not to say that we took farming expertise necessarily to mean someone was likely to be a good mentor. So there was an additional level of assessment, perhaps. And then in a few cases, we did look outside the membership in areas where we thought geographically we had fewer options. So that was particularly true in our project that was kind of on the border of England and Wales, where we looked in. It was essentially funded by the English government, but we did look into Wales for some farmer experts to then train up. So I think in most cases, the farmers had been mentoring in some kind of organic capacity. They'd kind of taken it upon themselves to try and help others. And then we were able to apply some training on top to make sure that there was a level of consistency to the approach.
Yeah. And you paired them with, were they always with the same farmers, or did they kind of go around with different groups?
Well, at the start of it, we assumed it would all be one-to-one. You would get paired with a mentor, have that mentor for a period of time. I think where we've got to now is that we need to have a more flexible approach, which is kind of what we've moved towards doing. So that might mean for some farmers, for some mentees, having a longer standing relationship with a specific farmer makes total sense when about building confidence. And then for others who are perhaps more confident at the beginning or have very specific things they're looking to understand or to get experience of, I guess we've taken a more flexible approach and giving them access to multiple mentors, perhaps for shorter amounts of time. And then the final thing that's developed, I suppose, over the course of all of these programs is we've started doing more small group mentoring, where you might pair up 3 mentees with 1 mentor around a kind of specific subject or specific area. And that's been quite productive because you get much more interesting dialogue between those slightly larger number of people. And I think certainly in the latest iteration of what we're doing on this, we're doing more of that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Bogdan, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I'm quite, it seemed quite interesting. But my question is, do you consider something success rate of that? I mean, not always is going very smooth, very good. Number of things, people change mind. So that is definitely which we never talk about it, always trying to keep in our bag. But how you would consider that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the evaluation, it was considered, and there were some cases where it hadn't worked so well. But in the north, I have to say, there was only one farmer for whom it didn't work well out of the people that I evaluated. But yes, there were certainly some in other areas where it worked less well. And we have in the report, the full report, which I didn't present all the details of, there are reasons why it didn't work so well. And yeah. So, but I would say from my experience in the north, the success rate is very high. But more generally, I think it is a little bit lower, but still, it's still pretty good. Yeah, as a system of trying to change farmer practices, which I think is a really hard thing to do. I think it works much better than anything else I've ever seen.
Thank you.
Maybe just to layer on top of that, I think perhaps at the beginning we'd assumed that in the areas of the country where we had the most traction before the project started, the results would be better. But actually the north was a good example of where we didn't actually have that many mentors. So we've gone from a very low base to having now quite a wide variety of farmers that we're working with. So that I think that was surprising. Having said that, there are other areas where we, like the North, didn't have a brilliant number of members at the beginning, which we found much more challenging to kind of develop the offer and the approach. And I suppose one of the reflections is perhaps looking at kind of geology and landscape. And I think what we were doing definitely got really good traction in areas where grassland is the majority of the farming system. And in areas where arable, for example, was much more prominent, or at least a decent component of most farm businesses, our offer didn't get as quick traction, even though I think it probably would have been just as impactful, because it's all about the way of working rather than necessarily the specifics of the farming system. So I think we're trying to work out how we can adjust what we do in terms of both how we market it and perhaps the sort of content that we're promoting for areas which have a greater component of arable within the system.
Thanks.
You, Andreas, I see your hand is up. Go ahead.
Hello to all. It's very interesting. And my question is, how many of the lady farmers and the farmers are dairy farmers? And they working in the import system or in a high import system? Thank you.
It's very hard. Did you understand, Lisa? Your connection is very bad. A lot of echoes and interruptions. Can you try again?
I tried again. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So my question is, how many of farmers are dairy farmers, milking and working there in a high import system or in a low import system? So, you understand me?
Your question is about dairy farmers working in high input and low input systems. That's I could catch that, but not anything else. Perhaps if you type the question in the chat, I could read it out.
Yeah.
Because, okay. Yeah, so we'll wait for Andreas's question to be typed. In the meantime, well, what struck me very much is the remarks about the fact that you had, besides the mentor-mentee relationship, you had, as a part of that, people talking together. So you might have around the mentor-mentee other farmers who got involved or were taking part and getting to know each other. So you had like a whole group dynamic around the mentor-mentee. And this community being, apparently, it was very much appreciated, what I understood from what you said, Lisa. This fact that they all got to know each other, and as a kind of community was really something interesting. Would that be correct that that is actually a kind of a spin-off of this program, and that it has, and if so, is there something that we could build on? I mean, it seems to be rather interesting, this feeling of community that arises.
I think Lisa's dropped off. I presume she's got some sort of internet issue.
Yeah, we're having problems with cyber, yeah, okay. We're having IT problems by the looks of it.
I can answer that though. I mean, that was definitely, well, that definitely came through very strongly, particularly in the North and Southeast projects, which were the longest running. And it was clear that farmers were, whether they were receiving mentoring or not, were really enjoying the wider community building element of the project. I think it's certainly fair to say that reflects perhaps what we've been doing for 10 to 15 years as an organization and as a membership. And I'm seeing Anna nodding her head. I'm sure it's very similar with the other similar organizations around Europe. So that, I guess that's just another nice bit of evidence behind what we're trying to do. And actually Lisa's back now. Lisa's previous research, which was a large UK government funded academic project, showed, and this is still my favorite piece of evidence behind what we do, showed that there was a positive correlation between length of involvement in Pasture for Life and the biodiversity and carbon that we're trying to drive at, which to me just speaks to the whole purpose and the whole rationale for community building as a means of delivering change.
Right. Andreas, are you going to have another go at asking your question orally, or are you going to put it in the chat? Here we are. I've got the question. Yeah. So here's the question. Andreas would like to know whether the farmers and the lady farmer in the in your survey, Lisa, are there any of them milking cows? In other words, are there any of them dairy farmers? And if they are they working low input or high yield?
Oh, you're on mute.
Lisa, you're muted.
Yeah, slightly confused by farmers and lady farmers. There were a big mix of ladies and gentlemen farmers. Not one lady farmer, quite a few actually. But were any of them dairy? Yes. Yes, some of them were dairy. Less of them. Most of them were beef and sheep. Most. There were a few dairy farmers, but not very many. Were working low input or high yield dairy. I think most of them would be on the organic spectrum. So probably, well, if they're going to do wildlife friendly farming, they're unlikely to be very intensive, high yield farmers. I don't think there would be any of those in the sample. Is that fair, Jimmy?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I would say that's reflective of our wider membership. I mean, I'm aware of one fully housed dairy that we have as a member in southern Scotland, but that's mainly because the member is the son who wants to change what his father has created. So yeah, on the whole, the dairy farmers that engage with us would typically have already gone organic and realized that there was something missing, which is that you can run a fairly high intensive organic dairy system with lots of imported feed and quite intensive kind of rotational grazing systems. So they would be looking to us for that grassland management, feed management solution as a kind of next step.
Yeah, Andreas, does that answer your question? I would say what question I immediately have when listening to that is, how would a low input dairy farm actually make any money? Because they'd be competing against these highly intensive ones that have got to house their cattle and bring in feed and can churn out milk at large quantities at probably low cost. So how would a low input dairy farmer actually compete?
There is a particularly good example up in the northwest who produces ice cream on farm and cheese on farm. So I think they've expanded their business a bit in terms of actually use some of their farm buildings to house businesses to add value to the milk product, and maybe that's one of the ways that you have to go in order to succeed, as well as being organic, which will bring in a higher price.
Okay. Anna, I see you have a question or remark?
Yeah, it's a slightly off pitch, but I can't help myself when I hear the positive results. Because what I would love to be able to do now is bring this to the agriculture colleges to start, when they're younger. Have you had any thoughts of how to do that? Sort of bang this result in the head of somebody in charge of the national curriculum or something? Because we really would love to start them young, wouldn't we?
Yeah, there are many things I would like to bring into the agricultural curriculum which aren't there. But yeah, I don't know if you've thought about any specific routes into those colleges. They still amaze me with their narrowness of curriculum. I remember going to a local college up in the north here, Newton Rig, which is now unfortunately closed, but it was about 2.5 years ago, and the one of the lecturers said to me, "Oh, we've got a new module now talking about the agri-environment schemes and how to manage land ecologically." It was just before they closed, and I didn't like to say to him, "Well, it was '86 when we introduced the first agri-environment scheme in Britain. So why has it taken so long to get to the stage when you're teaching how to manage in a different way, or how to manage the non-crop habitats on your farm, even that." But yes, I think you're right. I don't know how we target that. It's something to think about. Do you know of it being taught in any other countries in the agricultural curriculum?
No, not really. I mean, I used to be a lecturer at the ag college, but this is 20 years ago now, and it certainly wasn't there then. And I've been asked back maybe once or twice in the higher classes, but one would love it to become more of this actually works, guys, and so let's talk about it.
I know my colleague at Reading University does take his students to a variety of pasture-fed livestock and other farms which are employing different methods. But yeah, I'm not sure how widespread that kind of teaching is.
Yeah. Well, we'll do a crusade.
What struck me very much in the discussion, I mean, in your presentation, Lisa, was that it came back time and time again. One of the things the farmers seemed to really get out of this program was to get practical knowledge. Both mentors and mentees got lots of practical knowledge from talking to each other about details of livestock farming, how to do this, how to do that, mob grazing, whatever, And I'm just very curious. I mean, why can't they get it from the agricultural advisors or from farm journals or even from the agriculture colleges? Why is it apparently something that they don't seem to be able to get, and then when they join your mentoring program, they suddenly realize they can get it, through your mentoring program and talk to other farmers. So why is that? I mean, like I said, I remember one farmer saying, "I learned more from the Pasture for Life program than I ever learned at agricultural college," which is, I mean, so why is that? Why is there such a lack of places where you can go as a farmer to get practical knowledge about details of livestock management?
Jimmy, are you going to answer that one or something else?
Well, I was slightly coming in on the last question, but also I guess it speaks to that specific question. I think one of the things that this project and the evidence that Lisa's kind of built around it suggests to me is that agriculture is really more of a continuing education space than an upfront education space. And if there is a need for upfront education, it's really in just the basics. But then the prospect of being a young farmer and being buddied up with a mentor who's been doing it for a long time, that's something that you would never get through a university or a college. So so I guess in that respect, for me, it just feels very different in a good way. So I'd be curious to know what element of the mentoring bit would be relevant for the kind of lecture-based learning bit. And then, we are also looking at other ways to bring the expertise of our members to the wider farming community, both through in-person and online means. So that I think there's a load of different areas of investigation and work that needs to be done to kind of develop all of that. I mean, particularly for me, online is quite interesting, given that farmers probably spend most of their time at home alone. So if we're tapping that online space, we're kind of missing quite a big trick. And actually, I think the part of the success of the mentoring approach is that you've got someone at the end of a phone, which positions it very differently to the idea that you get a consultant to come to your farm. They're really expensive. They give you a report. It might sit on a shelf. Having that kind of real-time access to a sounding board and someone to just bounce ideas off, I think is really valuable. So yeah, I don't know whether that answers Anna's question.
No, yeah, it's a discussion really, because I actually didn't think I skipped as I always do. I thought that your farming methods are the ones, and mine and everyone else's good farming methods are the ones I want into the colleges. But you're right though, that because there are elements of the mentoring that could work for colleges too. All teachers love to have practical people coming in, telling their students sort of stories from real life. So not only because it saves you preparing 90 minutes lecturing time, but because we know that it works. So I think both could be interesting. But of course, mentoring an actual practical farmer, yeah, that's something else. But yeah, I'm hoping for involvement. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. So, any more questions or remarks? I would say one thing that I would, I mean, as you've all seen, we have this Agri-Nature Mentor project. It's funded by the Erasmus Plus. Yes, it's EU funded, and the idea is to carry out to set up mentoring modules and test them in 4 different countries in Europe in pilot areas. They all happen to be mountain areas, but a lot grazing and livestock farming is predominant in all 4 of them. So in that sense, Pasture for Life's experience is very relevant for our project. And at the moment, we've reached a stage that we're about to design. We're actually working on these modules, but we've uncovering a lot of gaps, either technical knowledge that we would need, to train the mentors, or practical things about what's the best way of designing a mentoring course, and how do you keep farmers motivated and interested, and how do you keep it going afterwards. And there I've really picked up this idea, what has come up quite a lot this meeting now, is that this ongoing support for farmers is really important, that they can carry on talking to each other and helping each other. So it's more than just a one-off mentoring where you exchange views and see each other's farm, and then that's it. It's really a process that lasts. Anyway, so as you will have seen, we sent around a document with a meeting invitation asking for contributions, to help us fill these knowledge gaps and to find best practice examples, because that's what we're really looking for as well. Best practice examples from other parts of Europe relating to mentoring and networking with farmers. And so please, if you have anything to contribute, please let us know, send us an email. Sophia or myself, we'll pass it on to the Agri-Nature Mentor Project. It can be an email with a link to documentation. It can be a personal email saying, like, I have had this experience and I'd like to share it. It could be videos, whatever. It's all good. We would really appreciate that. And in that context, I'd like to ask Lisa and Jimmy, in a nutshell, what would your advice be? Given your own evaluation of your own program, what would your advice be in a nutshell to us in our Agri-Nature Mentor project to design a mentoring program that motivates farmers, inspires them like yours has, and how will we set up making it more long-lasting, so that you have this function of that farmers who are transiting, who are trying to change their practices, can go back to their original mentors and get support over the months and even perhaps years to follow. So what would your advice in a nutshell be to us?
2 things. Get really good facilitators. Make sure you have people that are really effective at bringing groups of people together and know something about the farming systems that they're talking about. And WhatsApp is number 2. I think that's how a lot of our farmers post-program will be communicating with WhatsApp groups. And so I don't think it's a one-off mentoring. For most of them, they have made a relationship either with their mentor or with other farmers they've met through the program, and that will support them going forward, just through friendship and mutual respect and learning in most cases. I think, I don't know, Jimmy agrees, but there's a lot of WhatsApp groups out there, and I'm hoping that will help those of them who continue to need support to keep being supported. Although inevitably more money to continue support, and so that they know that there's somebody there is always valuable, isn't it? Just some ongoing structure of a supporting mechanism. But yeah, that's 3. Sorry, Timmy.
Well, I mean, I would agree with all of that. I think thinking about the longer term elements, which is certainly where my mind is focused at the moment. There's I think we all have to question whether we can get farmers to pay for this as a means of making it sustainable. I guess everything that I'm seeing, Lisa and I perhaps see this slightly differently, but everything I'm seeing at the moment suggests that the government aren't interested in paying for it. So we basically shoehorned this idea into a funding stream that was designed to pay for capital things like fencing or rebuilding barns so that they can serve as educational centres and things. DEFRA, who are the kind of English department who are responsible for all of this, they've, despite having multiple messages and communications through to them that this is a really good thing, they haven't really kind of grasped it as a thing they need to fund. And I think that's partly because of this way we, certainly in the UK, I presume it's not dissimilar in the EU, how we define certain elements of government spending. So mentoring gets lumped in as revenue, which always sets alarm bells, certainly in the English government, because they have a kind of fear that this is going to be a cost they have every year ongoing, whereas they're more happy funding capital projects because that seems to be a kind of time limited cost, which supposedly increases the value of an asset. So there's a few of us trying to work out how we can position this peer-to-peer learning space, which is very underfunded in the UK, position it as a capital expense, because it is ultimately going to increasing the viability and the underlying, whether it's an economic asset or a natural asset within our farmed landscape. So that's quite an interesting angle. And yeah, but I suppose overall the kind of long-term funding situation is very precarious. Lisa mentioned that there were comments in the evaluations that why can't we do this all over the whole of the UK rather than just through these protected landscape areas, which are a fraction of the total UK land area. That's because we haven't yet made that case successfully to government that it's worth financing. So I guess the message therefore to you as you're starting these projects in 4 different EU countries is thinking that far ahead as to the long-term funding model and making sure you're tackling it head on. Get government ministers down to see it in action, start building that story. That's I guess that's not something that I've personally always had the free time to do, but it's worth kind of trying to build that in because it's a storytelling PR exercise as much as anything else.
I like that actually. That's very interesting. Your idea of presenting mentoring, if it's just kind of mentoring as a capital investment, as an investment rather than that's an interesting idea. And you could certainly justify that. I mean, and as economists say, investing in human capital is one of the best investments any country can do. I mean, that's why we've got all this about lifelong learning and so forth. And then and inviting people to come. You didn't actually, you said yourself you didn't actually do that with your Pasture for Life program, invite any sort of public officials or politicians to come and have a look.
I had the odd meeting in London with officials from DEFRA about it to try and make them aware that it was happening, and it was successful. We didn't manage to get anyone onto farm. I mean, that said, ministers were going to farms that were involved, but through different avenues. And it's partly because policy lobbying is not what we do. We're very practical. So that's perhaps sometimes a bit of a gap in what we do. So perhaps if we had our time again, that might have been a bit more focused.
Okay. Well, those are very useful tips indeed. Yeah, right. And thank you for that. We will certainly take them on board. Okay. I think we have 90 minutes, but I think there's no point in we're all busy people, and so I think if there are no more questions, no remarks, I think we can close this meeting. No more? No. Just a few last things to say that we have after the summer break we will have the next ABC meeting with presentation will be around 1st September. We're still working on the exact date with the speaker, but that will be a presentation from Slow Food Italy, Slow Food International, about their new program where they will award the Slow Food certification to farms which meet their standards for both environmental as in terms of the way the kind of foods they produce and the kind of and the way they produce the foods. So it has to fit the slow food philosophy. And that could be of interest to some farms that are working in a nature-friendly manner. And slow food, of course, as you know, has a certain reputation among foodies and chefs. So that could be an interesting program for us too. It's only just started a few months ago, and they're expanding it. So Michaela Lenta from Slow Food will give a presentation about that at our next meeting around the 1st of September. And then we have from 9 to 11 September, we have the Eurosite annual general meeting, which is taking place in Lithuania, in Vilnius. And one of the items on the agenda is a day-long workshop on grazing. It will cover both, the focus is conservation grazing. It's linked to those habitats, those semi-natural habitats on the Annex 1 of the Habitats Directive that require grazing to stay in good conservation status. So there's a whole, I mean, you probably all know which ones I mean species-rich grasslands, calcareous grasslands, heathlands, fens, and so forth. They make up a very large slice of the Natura 2000 network, and of course also very important for the EU biodiversity strategy. So in other words, if we as EU are going to achieve our own nature goals, then we will certainly have to make sure that these habitats, which makes up such a large percentage of our biodiversity, are grazed and continue to be grazed, which then brings us to the question of the farmers who are at the moment responsible for the grazing, how they're faring. So the workshop will look at, on the one hand, we'll look at the conservation aspects in terms of what of these semi-natural habitats, how much the grazing they actually need, how many livestock units per hectare will be the ideal in terms of conservation management, etc. And then we'll look at the livestock that's supposed to be there, that should be there to graze it. Is it really there, or are there areas where there's a deficit, where there's not enough livestock actually grazing these habitats, where we would need more livestock rather than less, or areas perhaps where there's overgrazing? That may also be the case. And we will also look at, and we are currently looking for speakers to cover that part, for farmers, how are farmers responding, and what are the challenges for this kind of extensive livestock grazing on these habitats, and what can be done to support the farmers that are doing it and to get others to take it up. So that's from 9 to 11 September, and just keep an eye open on our ABC group web pages and Eurosite web pages for more information. And if you want to come to the AGM, please register and come. It's certainly the day-long workshop promises to be very interesting for us. And there are other topics as well on the agenda, so it's altogether an interesting meeting. That's about all for now. what we will do after in October, November, that's still open. So if any of you have ideas for something you'd like to present, feel free. I'd be glad to hear suggestions. And I think having said that, I think that's about it. Does anybody else want to say something or announce anything or contribute? And thank all of you for attending and for joining in discussion. And I wish everybody a very good summer break. If you're going on holidays, enjoy them. If you're working, don't work too hard. And we meet again around the 1st of September, and we'll already have quite a few things to follow up then, by the sound of it. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Right.